Hey, everybody, welcome back here. We have our next guest, Lee, also known as the Instagram handle 18 Good Guy. So we'd like to go ahead and say, Lee, thanks for joining us today and being a part of what we're trying to get out and help everybody with. And super excited to hear your story today.
And thank you so much for having me, man. It's an honor to be on.
Yeah, and I'd like to start this off with how we got introduced and how we're meeting. I've done this on the last couple ones, and it really just started over social media. I think you had posted some things that were out there that we really liked, and we just had shot you a message. Even though you have a very big social media presence and following, you responded back, and I like to highlight that to people to show that hey, it's all real people that are behind these things, and you never know who you're going to be able to connect with, the things you're going to be able to share, and the discussions that we've had, outside of this have been awesome. We share a lot of the same experiences and backgrounds, and realize we have a lot more in common than we don't.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. I've actually made it a point to I respond to every single thing that comes through, unless it's just seriously off the wall or hateful. And I have gotten some pretty ridiculous ones, but I respond to every single message that comes through. And obviously, the hope is to grow it to a point where maybe that's not feasible. But for now, it's definitely something that I really get a lot of fulfillment out of because a lot of people that do reach out have genuine reasons to, and they're pouring their heart out to a stranger, and I think that deserves some recognition and a little bit of humanity in return.
Yeah, and I think that is a huge valid point. There is that there are regular people that are looking for advice, looking for feedback, looking to get better, and want an unbiased opinion. And your ability to be able to provide that is invaluable to them. Um, who knows if they have that support structure where they're at? I would guess probably not because they're reaching out to what you see and what you stand behind. So that's
Absolutely,
incredibly it's
yeah.
incredibly awesome.
Thank you. I mean, I guess I can't call myself unbiased. I'm very biased in many ways,
Yeah.
but what I will say is, there are a lot of people that will reach out and have really, really good reasons to do so. And there's some people, that'll give, I guess you'd call it almost an entire Rolodex, their whole life story. And generally, it all boils down to something really simple. They're making these issues in their life seem like mountains, and it's really just a decision of do I or do I not. But then there's the flip side where people ask really, really Googleable things. And so, I try not to be flippant or um, rude, but there are definitely times to and times not to do it. If it's, well, how long is selection, man? Well, that's a very Googleable thing, and there's no secrets there. But I do think it is very cool that we live in an age where, when I was researching selection, there was a forum. I can't recall the name. I think it was Shadowspear, and
Oh
that
yeah.
was my
Yeah.
dude, I read that for hundreds of hours, and that was my only forum. Um, those guys were gruff in many ways. I didn't reach out or make a post or anything because they were so just closed off. Whereas nowadays we live in a really accessible time where a lot of people are genuine, they're human, and they want to help other dudes get to the position that they've gotten in. So I do think it is incumbent upon people to um, get over the quote unquote fear and just reach out, man. Because like you said, we're real people.
Yeah, and I think we owe that to people regardless of what sphere you're in, whether you're in the business sector, civilian, military. And I'm going to use the military for this example, especially people that serve in the special operations community and things like that. Is people want to know what you do, and you can explain that to a certain extent because to a lot of people, you're an anomaly, and they're never going to know what you've been through. They're never going to know how to prep or plan if people don't tell their story, and that's perfectly okay, right? It's those individuals that turn, in my own opinion, that turn and look at people and say, "Well, I already made it here, so you got to figure it out on your own, or you've got to grind
Yeah,
it out the way I did."
yeah.
I don't. I think that this is just completely counterintuitive, especially now the day with the internet, social media. Like, there's just so many references and things out there that you can help and clarify, for people.
Exactly. And I I had a really good conversation with Denny Galliero recently from Security Hall podcast, and he said that back in the day it was the marketing ads. We don't want you if you're not the athlete, the captain of the swim team.
Yep.
And to people who see the finished product, they might think, well, hell, I'm not that, and so there's no way I'm going to make that. But I believe that with again, as you said, the exposure of story, the exposure of trial and actual hardship, because none of this is easy, that it might allow for somebody who has the potential, they just haven't unlocked it or allowed themselves the bandwidth to be open to the hard work and the pain and the ardor of it. So seeing that story lets them know that it's doable. I'm not a fan of the, oh, if I can do it, anyone can, because I don't believe that at all.
Yep.
There's a lot of people who can't do a lot of things, and that's okay. But if I can do it, that means it is doable. And I believe that for anything, whether it's, applying to business school or becoming an astronaut or going special operations. If somebody has done it, that means it is doable again.
Yeah, and you highlighted earlier too of you'll get these messages from people, right? And some of the stuff might just seem way off the wall,
Yeah.
but their max, right, for what they can imagine or undertake maybe a completely different, like to us, right? Or me, it may seem very trivial. And to you, it may be a really big thing. But going back to what you just said, like reaffirming in people and let you know, like, hey, man, I was able to do it. I'm nobody special. Like, I just went and I did the thing and I was either successful or I wasn't. But the most important thing is when I walked away from it, I learned something.
Yeah, and I do tend to stray away from the I'm not special, because if you made it to that position, you're damn right you're special. You have showed value in some way, and I'm actually not a fan. Whether it's celebrities, business people, whatever. I'm nothing. This I'm not. I don't like what would you call it? It's the difference between humility and this, I guess, a feigned humbleness.
Yeah.
People downplaying themselves so others feel better about themselves. Rather, I'd pose that no, I absolutely have achieved something worthwhile and something special. But guess what? There's room at the top of the mountain. It's not just me. It's not just this guy. You can achieve it too. I'm not trying to keep you from getting there. So it is special. It is absolutely something that is more difficult than your regular person can do. But there's a lot of people out there who aren't regular, and you don't have to remain regular if you are now. There are heights you can reach that most people can't even fathom that they could have done.
Yeah. And that's a great point. I think I'd like to take this back and circle it back to you kind of telling us a little bit about your journey, where you came from, and then we're going to kind of intertwine these as we get up there because I think your background and how you got to where you are right now is one of those stories, right? One of those trivial things that you're exactly talking about that you just had to add a little bit of application and discipline to.
Absolutely. Where to begin? So, from the Midwest originally. Parents split when I was quite young. My father is the type of man that every single child on this planet deserves as a parent. Um, we could do an entire 5 hour podcast, and I could not even stop rambling about how unbelievably good of a man he is. Um, Whereas my mother got into substances, started hanging with the wrong crowds, and when I was quite young, there ensued a custody battle, a couple of details that I won't necessarily get into because they're not that interesting. But she endangered us quite a bit with the people she hung out with the drug use. But we didn't know. They're being so naive as a kid, it just dad felt safe, and there was something wrong with mom's house. So I kind of elected to stick by my dad, and he sequestered us away from that situation and saved me. I genuinely believe that had he not been as strong and courageous and patient as he was, that I would have absolutely followed down that path of some kind of substance abuse, some kind of gang affiliation, and just a lack of agency. Um, so everything I do is in recompense for that. High school, pretty normal, but I was always a fat kid. Um, only played baseball because it was a lazy man sport. I didn't play any sports, and then I went to a professional game and saw Prince Fielder up to bat, and my inner monologue, I literally said to myself, "Oh my God, there's a fat athlete. That could be me." And so it was almost a cop out in my mind, like, oh, there's a way I could achieve this, some semblance of what I perceive to be greatness whilst not having to change myself. Um, I recall being at practice and coach is like, "Oh, we're gonna warm up. We're gonna run a mile," and I was awestricken. A, we're gonna run a whole mile. That's unbelievable. B, as a warm up, you're gonna have to drag me off of this baseball diamond because I'm gonna die from this single mile. I think it took me 20 some minutes to do. So I was never really an athletic kid. Never really put in a lot of effort. I traded out baseball for a theater in my senior of high school. Acted in a couple of plays. Decided that's of course what I had to do with the rest of my life. Applied to college, got accepted into a couple theater programs, simultaneously joined the reserves, and decided that I wanted to do the ROTC program. Went to basic training and failed it my first time. The PT test at that point was 2 minutes push-ups, 2 minutes sit-ups, and a 2 mile run. I got, 33 push-ups in 2 minutes. And this is again after months of basic training. So I was very, very, very physically incapable at the time. And they did 3 PT tests in a row for me that I failed the same number. Went to fat camp, passed after 10 days, got to my advanced individual training, which is for psychological operations, immediately failed another PT test, and built it up over the next couple of months of that individual training, and luckily graduated without a hitch. Um, After that, went back to the civilian side because I was in the reserves. Stayed in the reserves for about 8 years total. Did every kind of job you can imagine, from apartment maintenance, construction, carpentry, to I was a bartender, worked at Lululemon, worked at a Renaissance fair for a couple summers, pushing a kid's ride. That was one of my favorite jobs I ever had, oddly enough. It was a very physical job because you're cranking a wheel by hand that's spinning this giant contraption of a carousel. It looks like a Goldberg machine, but it was actually fun. This whole time, I was very, very out of shape. The reserves was going to kick me out. And I alluded to the scenario on Denny's podcast recently, but I'll retell it here. I went to go skydiving on my 21st birthday, and I got there early, and they weighed me, and I was about 40 pounds over their weight limit. Out loud, I said, "Gravity has a weight limit." Trying to be funny, and the lady didn't laugh. She knew it was a pretty bad situation. So I called my whole family. I was embarrassed. I was like, "Hey guys, they're not jumping today. The winds are too high." Because my whole family was going to come out and observe me jumping. And it just one embarrassment after another. And then a pretty bad rejection by a girl I was very into was kind of the final nail in the coffin. And I started getting in shape. And it took me about 2 years before I got into shape where I could pass a PT test. So I spent a ton of time in a state where I should have been kicked out of the military, where I just, was kind of driftless. In college, I dropped out after about 2 weeks. I just wasn't in the mindset of learning at that time. All I wanted to do was play music. Um, I did tour as a small-time musician for a little bit, and I was obviously very um, engrossed by the arts, but that just made me kind of introspectively focused on the misery of my shortcomings as opposed to the solutions to them. But then eventually, again, I just got tired of my own, I guess, lowly ways, you could say, and started clawing it out, step by step, just as anybody. God bless my stepmother for she worked with my dad and I, and she endured 9 months of microwaves from frozen tilapia in our break room. Because that first 9 months where I decided to get in shape, it was a draconian dedication that I, if we're being honest, have not had since. But it was, it was the David Goggins mode before I knew who David Goggins was.
Yeah,
Um,
it's great. It's great you say that. We
yeah.
did a podcast with Bill Osland
Okay.
a couple months ago, and he highlighted that exactly that. Hey, everybody's going to have low moments, right? But
Yeah.
his exact words were, "Everyone's going to have low moments, but you're not authorized to sit here in the pity party forever. You need to figure it out, and you need to get up and get moving."
Well, and that, that's the hardest part of the whole thing is, I mean, it took me years to even take that first step because it just, you don't even know you're capable of it. And then once you start moving, you're like, oh, this hurts, it sucks, but it feels better than the alternative, which was not moving at all, both physically and metaphorically. And I mean, that first step, man, really, really, even if you're already in shape and you got a goal, that's the hardest to take because of the unknown nature of the outcome.
Did you notice during that time that your tribe or your people that you were hanging out with started to change or was giving you pushback?
Immediately, I started losing friends, both on the military and civilian side. And yeah, I mean, it completely overhauled. I mean, even some of my family members kind of fell by the wayside. So I alluded to my mom before. While I was in kind of the tail end of high school, she served a short stint in prison. And when she got out, our relationship was actually pretty decent. But I was about 9 months into getting in shape. I'd started losing friends and kind of trimming the fat there. And there was this um, incident, I guess you could say, that boiled over at a holiday at my mom's house, and it struck me that if these are bad people, I don't have to be around them. Whether they're blood related to me or not, I don't have to be subject to this madness, this again, this lowly state of being, that I can really choose who I'm around. And so that exponentially changed the way I viewed friends, family, everyone, because then I lost almost all my friends by choice because they weren't the types of people that I felt were going on the trajectory that I wanted to be on.
Yeah, what's crazy to me honestly is that you failed basic training. I've only met a couple people that have
Yeah.
actually done that, but I have seen the after product. I think this applies to anything, right? Is when you came back in and you were able to achieve that milestone. We worked so hard to achieve a milestone, and then like you had just talked about it, right? After that, you just kind of started to
Yeah.
fall back off.
But and with the military, it was the first time in my life I'd had true structure, people telling me what to do. Not that my home with my dad was unstructured by any stretch, and he's still discipline oriented and what have you. But you got a drill sergeant screaming in your face. You're gonna do the exercise. You're going to do the run. You don't have an option. And then when I got back home as a reservist, it just kind of dawned on me that I can kind of do what I want. And what I wanted at that time was, I guess you call it a hedonistic comfort. So I got even bigger than I had been previously. I think my previous weight, my max weight pre-army was like 225, 230 pounds, I think. And then in the reserves, I got up to 290 pounds. And we're not talking any semblance of muscle mass whatsoever. Um, so it got pretty bad.
What had you get back on the trajectory then? I mean, you were talking about, right, like a 9 month. At the end of that 9 months, as you were going through that and feeling, I'm gonna assume that it wasn't all sunshine and roses. You had many setbacks throughout that 9 months.
That first 9 months, and again, this is probably some sort of recall bias I'm having, but the only thing that I can remember fueling me so bad was the heartbreak, and all I wanted was to just prove uh, to that girl that I had it in me, that I could be the guy that I thought that she wanted me to be. Um, it's a young man's folly, I guess, but that's it. There were no moments I felt I missed out on anything. There were no moments that I felt, oh man, this is so tough. I was just so fueled by the hatred of my own shortcoming, not self hatred. I didn't think that I was worthless or anything like that, but just hatred of the circumstance that I had allowed myself to fall into. And it wasn't until in the first 9 months I was so disciplined, and then after that is kind of ebbs and flows up until I made the switch to active duty.
When you decided to make that switch and come in, what what was that mindset like? Like what made you want to make that leap?
Still, I was kind of directionless with the work that I was doing. Again, I was working any job I could find to kind of claw my way into a higher income. And at the time, I was doing a lot of acting for like online commercials, things of that nature, and I just wasn't making any money doing it. And I thought about it really deeply, and I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to make a plan. And if I don't have anything, like if I don't have my big break by 30, I'm going to go do selection. I'm going to join Guard SF and I'm going to do selection. I was about 24 at the time. Then I thought to myself, well, no, that's not really how it should work because you could have a wife and kids, all these things that preclude you from going to selection at that point. And you could be an actor, musician, or whatever for 20 years, have a great successful career, then want to go SF, and then you can't. But in the inverse, you could go be SF for 20 years, and you could still do all those things that you wanted to do before. So it was just a logical prioritization of what mattered in immediacy versus long term.
Yeah, I mean that's that's a phenomenal way to look at it too. And I think it it's I don't want to say it's difficult for me to kind of think of it that way because I came in the military right at 17. But there's a lot of guys that I have met throughout my time that have had that exact same mindset. Like, hey, I wonder what it would have been like if I just would have taken the leap.
Yeah.
And I guess my question to you is like, when you decided to go ahead and commit to that and say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and sign up, I'm going to go ahead and put myself through this and see if I got what it takes. What was the timeline like between signing up and then going to selection? And then did you find that drive and discipline again to get you ready? Or did they have a program laid out for you? Because I know, the guard's a little bit different.
Yeah, so once I kind of made the decision, it was a relatively quick process. So like I said, I was in the reserves. I got what is called a 368, if I remember correctly, a conditional release from the reserves, allowing me to sign an active duty contract. I had actually initially asked to sign a human intelligence contract because there was a specific unit that I had researched and wanted to go to. And at the time, I was an E5, and the prior service accession business rules stated that E5s could not go to 35 Mike. It had to be like 11 Bravo, the infantry, or 18 X-ray, which is SF. And so SF was actually my second choice. And I said, I'll take that. The more I researched it, I had always kind of had an admiration for Green Berets and the SF, but there was a part of me that thought maybe I don't have what it takes. Maybe it's too much. I don't really know. But then once that kind of became the primary option, I said, you know what, we're gonna go for it regardless, because worst case, if I don't make it, I could always try to weasel my way into PSYOP on the active side. Um, Luckily, it all worked out, but I had my contract signed within 2 months of making that decision, and then I left 3 months later. It was right at the start of COVID, and I actually had to do the entirety of basic training and advanced intermediate training again. So as an E5, I did the 22-week OSUT during COVID, uh, which was
Brutal.
just, it was brutal. At first, they treated us like NCOs. They said, you guys have already established yourself in the military. You guys get your own barracks room. You can go off post on weekends. Wear civilian clothes. Like we trust and respect that you're NCOs until you prove otherwise. And then COVID hit, and we were the same as everybody else. And they put us in the field Monday through Friday for 11 weeks. So I did 55 days in the field at Benning with no Ranger tab. So a little disappointed about that one. But yeah, full kit and caboodle. So
Dude,
that was my penance for
you get
failing personally.
you get times like that and it starts making you rethink like
Oh, dude, you have no idea. But and looking back, what a small entrance ticket for the race, and I would pay it again 100 times over.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I guess my relation to that is when I decided to make the switch to the dark side, as we would say. I showed up to Fort Benning, Georgia, to go to IBOLC, and
Oh,
I'd been away from the conventional army for a while, and they were like, "Hey, it's however long. I think it's 16 weeks, like in the field." And I was like, "Oh, okay, like whatever." Man, you get to like week 8, and you're like, I don't know, man. Like,
well, and as a reserve PSYOP, I had never really done a ton of field time. I'd done a GRTC and the odd field exercise here and there, but then I've got Fort Benning spiders crawling up my nose as I'm sleeping.
yeah.
Centipedes crawling across my face, snow at night, blazing in the day, and my real first experience of like what it meant to actually be soldierly. So it was an invaluable experience. Character building, as they say.
So where did you go after your time at? Now, I guess did you feel yourself starting to gain that confidence and really starting to believe in yourself as you're going through this entire process leading up to, going through your time at Benning and then getting ready to go on to selection?
Absolutely. Especially the group of kids that I had with me. I call them my kids, even though they're not kids; they're grown men. But I was the E5, and they're the new privates, so I feel I raised them in the army. But I had a great group of kids. They were just awesome. Many of them are, I serve alongside now, and they're still in regiment. Some guys have gone to the regular army or a ranger regiment, and they're just crushing it. But those guys really inspired confidence in me. But there were definitely moments where, because I started from such a deficit, and as I said, my discipline ebbed and flowed. I still made mistakes and tripped up, and I blade ran for some time, and I don't recommend that for anyone. We did our first PT test when we got to Fort Bragg for the awaiting training section. So that's for guys who are in hold waiting to go to the Special Forces preparation course. We took our PT test. We had something, because it was COVID backed up, that we had something ridiculous like 250 students there. And they said, okay, the top 120 of you are going to class up this next prep course, and the bottom, you guys will stay in hold.
Dude, gotta love the merit base where you can
Oh
just
yeah,
keep. Okay, well you're 100. You're 101 now. You'd think you'd go to the next one, and now you're like, well, now the next one I take, I'm at the bottom third again.
yeah. Well, and I think I got so the minimum standard to stay in student hold was 240 with an 80 in each category, and I think I got a 246. Still was not crushing PT by any sense of the matter. Um, and the cadre circled us up. He segregated us by PT scores, or 270 above over there, 260 to 270 here, and 240 to 260 here. And he circled us around. He said, just so you guys are aware, with what this group scored, your statistical likelihood of passing selection is zero. We have never had someone score this low on their initial PT test and get selected. To this day, I don't know if that was a mind game or what. He's trying to get people to quit, but uh, it's one of those stupid moments where you have hubris, and I whispered to myself, "Well, I'm going to be the first." And I ended up, by the grace of God, improving enough to make it. And I had an injury, and I stayed in the student hold. I was the class leader for about 9 months. Um, made good friends with the cadre there. Still talk to some of them, but those guys also really really looked out for me through my injury, helped instill confidence into me, and got me to a place where I was going to make it and not blade run like I previously had been.
I want to. You brought up something I was thinking about too, and you talked about blade running. You're talking about barely meeting the standard, right?
Yeah.
Especially at the time, the use of sock standard for 80 points in each event. Where where was your support during that time? And did you still throughout this whole process, did you have a relationship with your mom? And like how was your dad, kind of being there for you? And I only asked because
Yeah.
for myself, I have I don't even know if I wouldn't even call it rocky at this point. It's just, it's non-existent. Is
Hmm.
my relationship with my mom is just, it's non-existent, and it has
Yeah.
been extremely rough for many years for multiple different reasons. And I'm speaking from my own perspectives. There's a lot of times when you go through a lot of these difficult events, and if you don't have a support group, or you have one, right? Like my dad was always mine up until he passed away, and it sounds like, yours was your dad too. But for me, there was always that point where you're kind of like, I was like, damn, you kind of wish, like, I know I have this bad relationship, and it goes to like a different part of me, and I kind of don't worry about it. But there are those times where you're like, damn, I wonder what it would be like if my mom was here for me, you know?
Yeah. I guess well, depending on how you look at it, I believe I've been fortunate that it really hasn't bothered me a ton. That incident I alluded to earlier, I stopped talking to her altogether that day. Actually just reconnected with her this past summer, but it had been 8 years. Um, in the time I was going through the course, I had zero contact with her, and I'll be honest, I didn't really think about her unless it was brought up in conversation, something like this, where people are talking about their family and their history. Uh, Again, I hate to sit here and be cheesy and harp on it, but my dad is so unbelievably strong and present and capable, and every positive adjective I could possibly conjure up. He's all of it to such a degree that there is never any lack of support in my life. There's never a vacancy, space to fill, anything like that. He was all of it. And whether it was my training runs back home in the Midwest, or it was events during the Q course, must pass events, I would always envision him at the finish line waiting for me, and that always gave me strength. Just thinking about him cheering me on, and thinking about the day that I'd be able to see his face when I got the beret, and that envisioning that always, always, always got me through any of my hard times. Um, all my buddies called me weird, but I actually brought a picture of him and I out to SUT, like laminated and duct taped it. So when I was feeling poopy because of whatever we were doing, I would just whip the picture out and have lunch or dinner, quote unquote, with my dad. So to summarize and answer is I had an incredible support system, still do. Um, he believes me more than I believe my own self, and I guess that's one of the things that I really try to harp on with the page is that if you can't find that kind of person in your life, because a lot of us, man, it is unbelievable how many people don't have that. I would suffice to say a majority of them. Then the goal should be to be that person. So many people are damaged or slighted in some way in their childhood that's how they choose to express what their form of understanding of love is, all all the while still having that vacancy where they felt they didn't have that reciprocated love, or the love that they desired. Whereas to me the solution is to be what you desire. If you didn't, especially if you didn't have it, because if you just are what you received, then you're just going to perpetuate the hurt and for lack of a better buzzword, the trauma that was inflicted upon you. So if you have one of those people, you know how valued it is. It is a superpower on your side. And if you don't have one of them, then by God, you have to become that for someone, because it is the most important role you could possibly play in someone's life.
Yeah, I mean, that's spot on. I have 5 phrases that I use for this company, and one of them I tell people all the time is, or I guess two of them really, but one of them is, be the change you wish to see.
Yes.
Right? You don't have to repeat all the things that were done to you.
Yep.
And this is going to kind of, the second phrase is going to lead into my other question here, but the other one I always ask people is, hey, be the leader you would follow. And you go ahead, pull out your phone, you go to the bathroom, whatever. Just look at yourself and ask yourself, would I be my own friend, my father, my brother? Would I want to be my own parent? Whatever, right? Add that in that category. Would I follow me financially, emotionally, mentally? And if your answer is no, you already know what you need to work on.
Yeah.
And it's it just really comes down to self leadership and self reflection. And I say that because your dad sounds like he's just incredible. And I would ask, like, what are some of those attributes or characteristics that you would use to describe him? Because hopefully somebody's going to listen to this and they're going to be like, man, I wish I had a dad like that, or I wish I was that kind of parent to my child. If I only knew, right? And if you can provide maybe some of those characteristics, maybe it'll get people to look inward.
Absolutely. But the two that just stand out as glaring in my mind are patience and a demonstrable confidence. Uh, on the patient side, I have told him many times, and this is going to sound bad. I don't care. Um, were I to go through the trials that he went through, um, say with my own kids in a divorce, with the things that my mother put him through and subjected us to, were I the same man in the same, or were I in those same circumstances, I would have killed her. I would have murdered her and flee the country with my children because I'm not that patient. And he, the amount, and I've asked him, how did you do that? How did you stay so? What made you believe? And he always just shakes his head and says, I knew. And he said, I don't know if it was God on my side or because he wasn't really religious at the time. Um, but he just had this unwavering belief that it was going to work out. And that kind of plays into the demonstrable confidence is that every single person I saw him interact with, he was warm. He acted with grace. He treated people with dignity and respect, but he was firm and he was intimidating. And people feared him and still do in many ways because he's a very dominant person, a dominant personality. Yet he speaks softly. He doesn't yell at people. Doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to, and people respect him. Um, and it's because he has that confidence that things are going to work because he has put in the requisite work to make it possible. So the two biggest ones are again patience and confidence, and I believe if you can exhibit those to whether it's your children or your subordinates or your superiors or whomever, that it's going to inspire them to be confident in you and believe in you because people who aren't confident are usually in a rush. They're in a rush to get things done. They're in a rush to get things over. And people who are not confident usually aren't patient. And I think they go hand in hand. Um, yeah.
No, I mean, that's phenomenal insight. How have you like continued to learn from that and then utilize that to get you through the Q course to graduation, and then when you finally, like, was your dad there when you guys at graduation?
He was, man. It was the best moment of my life so far.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like, how did that go over? And then knowing that the journey on your professional side was just beginning.
Oh man, it's yeah, I don't know how to adequately describe it, but it's I think every prudent parent wants their children to do better than they did. And every prudent child wants to, in some way, make their parents proud. And I know there's this whole movement like you can't do everything for your parents, you can't just work to make your parents proud. And I believe that's true to some degree. I mean, even when I initially wanted to join the military, my dad was against it. But just because he didn't want me to be in harm's way, he wanted me to be safe. It was just him caring. So not everything you're going to want to do is going to be for your parents' approval right away. But I do think that if you actually care about people, you will want their approval. And I don't like the modern trope that you only do things for yourself because that just sets you up for loneliness, long-term loneliness, because you have to please other people in some way for them to like you and enjoy your company and love you because it's all conditional and it should be. But with that said, um, I every setback I had, every triumph I had, everything, I would just think of like, okay, what's my dad gonna think? What is he? Would I be acting in a way that honors him, or would I be acting in a way that he might be ashamed of? And I messed that up 1,000 times in my life, and I'll mess it up again. But at the regimental first formation, you sing the Battle of the Green Beret, and you march in your little beret. Everyone dons it for the first time, and it's this big event. And turning around to see his face in the crowd is, you know, it's there is no possible price. All the hard work you put in, all the blood, sweat, and it doesn't matter. It seems like such a small cost, and it seems like it's just nothing when it put up against a moment like that. That feeling of pride you have, um, and it's like I said, one of the best moments of my life. And for anyone out there seeking a big goal, I don't care what it is, those that's really what life's about, is those moments of payoff like that. But as far as it, you don't know what you're getting into, so that seems like a very pinnacle moment. But then 2 weeks later, you're a freshman again at language school, and then you get to be the big dog at language, and you pass. Yeah, I'm cruising, and then you're the stupid freshman again when you get to your team, and then you get some team time. You're like, oh heck yeah, I'm cruising. This is good. And then you go to the B team, or broadening assignment, whatever, and you're the freshman again. You don't know anything. So it's a perpetual series of uh, peaks and summits, peaks and summits, and
And
far from it.
I always like to, I tell people, I was talking to a group of friends that work in the corporate world, and they never served in the military, and they're super infatuated with like what you're talking about, right? Like just being around giants and team room, right? Team room, team room, team room. And I was sitting there talking to them that, hey, regardless of the organization that you serve in, as long as you check your ego at the door,
Yeah,
you are willing to learn each and every day and don't rest on the what I have done, right? Like you can make incredible, strong teams and organizations. Um, Build that tribe of people that are better than you, and it you're 100% right when you're the new guy, right? You're at the bottom, and even if you sit there for a long time, if you have the mentality of like I'm walking in here each and every day and I walk among giants and I can at least learn from somebody else, good or bad, right? Like it's it's a win. It's an absolute win. Um,
yeah,
and
absolutely. Oh, so
Yeah, and
sorry.
that no, you're getting that, and that takes me to something I try that we try and talk about, and I'd like to hear your opinion on it too. Is solidifying your base, going like what is your base, and you've talked a little bit about what yours, and I'd like to expand upon it a little bit. Is in Soth they always talk about being a master of the basics, and a
Yeah,
lot of this applies to corporate America too. You can say that you're a master of the basics, but you can never be too good to go back and refine. When we talk about using marksmanship, is there really such thing as advanced? I mean, there is, right? If you do it, but if we can master, drawing from a holster, perfect hand grip, extension out consistently to get really good at it and establish a base of discipline, physical fitness, physically, mentally, emotionally, all those things will bleed out over each other. Then we can start adding on layers to add more complex. But no matter what you do, there are times you're going to have to go back and reset and be like, hey, am I still on the path I need to be on? Or am I just trying to add more layers to things and I'm on this rocky foundation? Um, you'd mentioned, difficult times and things you've faced up through here. And I'd like to get your opinion on like, hey, as you've continued on in your professional journey and you've been the new guy in these new areas, have you had to go back and reestablish, your base and refine?
oh, absolutely. I feel like you said, if you're prudent about anything at all, it's kind of a never-ending process. You should be revisiting those things. Um, you know, and there's, like I said, there's always the next summit. There's always the next thing. You're never really going to find a true, well, we made it, and this is it. This is the pinnacle. at least in this sphere, and I hope other spheres as well. Because if you think you've made it, there's a thousand other things to do in life, and you'll never be able to do it all. And that's kind of the beauty of it. But every single station that I get to, it's like, man, I really don't know nearly as much as I thought I did. I thought I had a real handle on this. From things as stupid as logistical processes, I thought I knew everything about running logistics on a team, or as much as I needed to. And then I get to the B team recently, and it's, hey, there's all these processes on the back end that you didn't know about. And there's all these offices that you also didn't know about, and they all do these very specific functions that you don't know about, and you now have your task is now to complete mission without any knowledge of how this system works. Go do it. I said, well, you know, I'm going to have to humble myself and take the time, not just say, oh, this is stupid, this is beneath me. Then no matter how much you don't like it, it's you have to go back and learn the nitty gritty, small details of what is considered baseline for your position. Um, and that goes, for even some of the higher level units. I've heard about guys, showing up on their first day and like, well, what do I do? And they're like, throw chem lights and keep up. Well, that's a hell of a thing to say to a guy that just graduated some of the most, advanced military training on the planet. But I'm very much of the belief that you don't have to be qualified to fill a role necessarily. You can learn on the fly, and I think that's a skill. It's a type of genius, um, that most people who have done anything great in their life were not ready for it. How do you prove you're ready for something that you've never done? By doing it and messing it up, and then correcting your mistakes and just not making the same mistake twice.
Yeah, it's Tom Spooner. I had an opportunity to go see Tom Satterley, Tom Spooner, and I went to the
Awesome.
All Secure Foundation retreat this last year. And Tom Spooner said something that really stuck with me. I mean, we talked a lot about resilience and things, but he said people that are measured, that serve in some very critical roles and very high units and organizations, right? You can say, you apply this to this. Again, I want to relate this, like you can apply this to the civilian organizations too, is when you fail, there's no option to just be like, all right, well, let me go ahead and like mope about it and figure it out. It's grab your stuff and get right back at it. How quickly can you measure failure, readjust, and run right back through it again?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is established from your base, right? Your base and the people that you surround yourself with. Because if you want to be great or you want to be mediocre, you can just surround yourself with those people and then they're going to go ahead and validate the way you feel. But if you want to get better, you have to find those giants and people that are going to find you on those low days, give you what you need, and tell you to suck it up and let's get back at it. Because they're going to make sure that they pull you along with them because you show value added. You're not somebody who's not value added.
Yeah, I think it's also incumbent upon the person to just understand that, I guess, much in the Stoic sense, that in a way, not to devalue it completely, but in a way, it doesn't matter what you're feeling. The work has to get done regardless. You can feel it all, feel the whole spectrum of it, but that should not um, have any bearing on what you're doing. The line I wrote some time back on the page is that you have to captain your ship in spite of the winds that whip it, because you're going to go through storms, you're going to navigate around reefs and rocks and icebergs and all these things, but you still have a destination, a port you're trying to get to. Are you going to just let go of the wheel and hope you're not dashed upon the rocks? That's how you get shipwrecked. You have to steer the ship no matter what's happening. And I think that is all courage is, because everyone I know who's done something courageous was in a situation that's scary as hell, that inculcates a massive amount of fear, and fear is just a feeling, and it's doing it anyway. That's the real courage. And so if people just learn to have that courage and be able to trust themselves that, well, I haven't died from any of my failures yet. So if I just go and attack it, regardless of what I'm feeling, this anxiety, this apprehension, well, it's going to be okay. Obviously with limits to everything, but it's people are much more capable of acting in spite of their feelings and they believe. It's literally a decision.
Is that what drove you to go ahead and start your page? Was it the things you had experienced early on in life and just seeing that you could bounce back from it and being vulnerable enough to just want to carry people along?
No, actually, initially it was just me trying to be funny. So when I was the class leader in the awaiting training, we had this situation where we were supposed to do these famous sessions are called across the street sessions, where you get a little messed up by your cadre. It's all character building activities, we'll say.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it was the week before we were supposed to go to the preparation course, and our cadre had told us like we're not going to do across the street this week. We don't want to degrade you guys before you go over there. Everything's gonna be fun. We're like, sweet, sounds great, nice chill week. We did a 5 mile run on that Monday, and we had two guys heat cat. One of them to the point where he got medically discharged from the army because his brain started frying. So we're really unfortunate. But me being uh, I'm biased, but I think I'm funny. Probably at the worst times. I made a meme about it, the Spider-Man meme where they're carrying the guys. And it said, "Careful, he's a hero," for the guys that fell out of the run, so we didn't have to go across the street the next day. And then we went across the street the next day because my meme had gotten pushed out to a couple of the other SF pages at the time, and we thought that that was the reason that we were going across the street. Ended up being all a farce, and the guy was just messing with us. And I was like, "Did you see the meme?" He's like, "No, I didn't see anything." But from then on out, throughout the whole course, I got accused of every SF meme page that popped up. That we know it's you. It's got to be, it's got to be Lee. It's got to be you. Um, and then, but I didn't feel I deserved to make a SF meme page. I wasn't even SF yet. So when I finally got to language school, I was like, there's no Charlie pages. I'll make a Charlie page. And so I was just, trying to be funny initially. And then I posted, I can't remember what it was, something wholesome. And that started to get a lot of traction. And so I'd written 5 books prior to coming active duty, very philosophy based, a little bit of poetry. And I was like, I wonder if my writing would do well here. And sure enough, it started to take off. Um, So it did not start as what it is now by any stretch. It just started as me being a jackwagon, for lack of a better term, and trying to be funny.
And just for people like listening, and some will understand, like when you have those rough days of going across the street, dude, a good old meme is just all anybody needs to attach to and be like,
Oh
this is all worth it. This is all worth
yeah,
it.
exactly. Yeah,
You know?
fond days.
Yeah, man. I mean, um, that's awesome. Have you pivoted since then to continue what you're doing and continue to get the message out there?
Uh, I guess not entirely. What the page did has shown me, I guess, is that because again, I wrote these books without any real aspirations of them being prolific or having any kind of notoriety in any way. I just kind of wanted to leave a written record of myself should anything happen to me in this profession. So I put them on, I put them on the internet. I self-published, but I haven't advertised them or anything. The only time I really even get sales is when I tell my friends about them and we all bought your book, I'll support. Like, thanks, dude. Get my $2 royalty. So very, very kind of them. But um, it, being a writer, I've been writing since, or as a hobby and a pastime and a concerted effort since I can remember. So it is something that I've always dreamed, kind of as a far off thing. Oh, maybe that would be cool someday if I could, write a famous book or do it full time. And then the pages kind of showed me like, hey, that's potentially a viable reality. So I guess all it's really forced is for me to it's given me confidence, given me more motivation, and I guess giving me it's become a muse for me to continue to try to figure out my own problems and maybe help other people in the process. Because all the writing I do on the page is directed at me, as much as it might not seem like it for some people, but most of the stuff I write is stuff I'm going through or I have been through, and I need the advice as much as anyone.
Yeah, I mean that hits it right on the head, and that perfectly describes where this like the name came from, and I think we talked about it before, was everybody faces difficult, successful times, but what you do beyond that and how you give back to people is truly what matters. And there's that saying of, hey, history repeats itself. Like, history can't repeat itself. It's just the people that still make the same dumb decisions.
Yeah.
And somebody out there is living your story. There's somebody out there who's lived my childhood, who's lived your childhood. And when you put those things out there to reaffirm for yourself and other people are utilizing them, right? It just shows that we're all we're all part of this thing. And Denny said something to me when we had a call probably about a month ago now. And I go back to the phrase of like the team room, right? Everybody wants to know like what's the team room like, and nobody ever wants to leave the team room, right? Because those are your guys, those are your people,
Mhm.
those are your safe space, if you will. And he said something to remember is the team room is always bigger on the outside.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's a phenomenal point, right? Like there's so many people out there that you can relate to and you can help, and um, it all just doesn't end there. It doesn't end at your organization. It doesn't end at your office. It doesn't end. Find those people. Just be who you are.
Yeah. I mean, there's that classic phrase, it's like to be loved is to be understood. And I experienced that very early. With one of my bigger inspirations for, I would say the biggest now for the way I write, the page and everything. I hadn't read since I dropped out of college. I didn't read for probably a good 5, 6 years. I just had no interest in it. And then one of the books I did pick up when I started getting back into it was the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, which I would recommend to every single person on this planet to read. And it was that feeling of, oh my God, this guy who was around 2,000 years ago, couldn't fathom some of the realities that I live with. And yet here he is so succinctly describing the same predicaments, the same troubles, the same challenges that I'm facing. And so I felt so understood, and that gave me power. It made me feel unified. Like, man, if he did it, then again, it's doable. And so that's, I guess, one of the things I'm trying to do is to show people that, hey, you are understood potentially without even knowing it. There are other people who get it, what you're going through. It's not in a denigrating way, but you're not as unique as you believe. Your pains are not singular; they are shared, and that makes you in. I don't want to say just like the rest of us, but um, it puts you in the same position that we were in when we succeeded, or when we dreamt of succeeding, and therefore you can be in all those same positions too.
Absolutely, and it starts with the belief in yourself, right?
Yeah.
And you some people have to find a way that's going to be able to do it. Um, Speaking from my own experience, I remember when I even first started talking about doing anything outside of what I was doing at the time, right? Looking at going to selection, it was like everybody was coming out of the woodwork telling me why I shouldn't do it and why I wouldn't make it. And if you don't have some sort of self belief or surround yourself with people, man, you're gonna keep in this rut and doing what everybody else wants you to do, and you're gonna turn around and have a lot of what ifs.
Yeah, it makes it exponentially harder. Though I think still, oddly enough, still doable. I mean, there were times where I didn't believe that I was going to make it, but what I did know was that I was going to make them make the choice for me. And I think so. Oh, again, this is not even just soft specific. This is any kind of arduous process that people can go through. Is they pick themselves up. There's another page called Infinite Grit, and he talked about there's 3 kinds of ways of quitting the other day, and one of them is you just stop putting out effort because you think it's hopeless, or you think it's, well, I'm already done, so I might as well not exhaust myself. And that is just the wrong answer. A lot of times they're looking for people who are broken and continue. And I think that's, as you're saying, that's the real mark is, can you be at your lowest and still do something that you only thought you could do at your highest. And maybe that you're even stronger because you're at a deficit at that point. And so if you're still doing regular things that you would have done had you been at your normal strength, then with that deficit included, you're actually stronger than you even believed before. So just continuing in the face of odds and not allowing yourself to desist, making if it's a process or um, a regimen that someone else is making the decision for you, because we do run into those in all kinds of facets of life. That let them make that decision. Don't make it for them.
And continue to seek things that are going
Yeah.
to put you outside your comfort zone, right? So you can bounce back. I mean, I can't tell you how many times it's the same way trying to start a business, right? Or I, people say no, or they say, hey, you shouldn't do that, or they think, hey, look at the direction that you're going in. It must be so nice. And Cam Hanes says that all the time, right? He
Mm-hmm.
laughs now when people say it must be nice because
Yeah.
there's so much work and effort and things that go into it. I mean, even thinking about you, the amount of time that it takes to respond to messages, the amount of time it takes to put thought and effort into certain things is it's additional tasks that you're taking on because you feel like you haven't arrived. That,
Mm-hmm.
hey, this is going to be uncomfortable. I'm not going to rise to a place where I'm at and just settle. And like letting other people know subconsciously, right, and through your actions that, hey, it is possible. Just you might get told 1,000 times no, right? But just keep going, and if no for no other satisfaction but yourself.
Right. And Dr. Andrew Huberman said, I'm going to largely paraphrase here. So, the value to doing hard things regularly is that so when you meet a challenge that seems insurmountable, you might think to yourself, well, maybe I'm not capable of this. Maybe I haven't ever defeated this, but I know I am capable of overcoming hardship and doing hard things. And therefore, that gives yourself essentially a permission to endeavor because you know you are capable, maybe not of the end state, but of the endeavor itself.
100%. I'd like to ask you now, where with all the things that you're doing, with all the things you're providing people through action, through words, where do you see what you've built going forward? Where would you like to take it to, or what would you like to see come of it?
Yeah, so I've got a couple things I would like to try in the military before I take these steps. But the long term, I would eventually like to um, merge kind of the auspice of my writing with this. I would be public at that point. I would be non-operational. Um, but that would be my eventual end goal. But with the specific delineation of myself from what good guy is, because I would like good guy. I want to keep it a charitable effort. I don't take any profits from it. All the money that comes through the page either goes into new product or goes to whatever charity I'm donating at the time. Most recently, Special Forces Foundation this last year. This year, I'm looking at doing an event to raise money for some anti and counter child trafficking charities. Something I very strongly believe in. Don't know who wouldn't. I feel like it goes without saying, but so I want to keep Good Guy as a charity oriented thing, and I make no concessions. I'm a dirty capitalist. I would love to make a living off of my writing and God willing speaking someday, but I really want to delineate myself from the page and myself from the hey, I was a Green Beret, and so that makes me super valuable. Because I don't believe in that whatsoever. I believe that I was able to show value in some way, and therefore I was able to achieve this accolade. Not that I am valuable because I have the accolade. Um, so yeah, I mean these are very very long term plans, but I'm not going to be coy and make it sound like I don't want the spotlight or it's the desire to be out there and spreading it as far as I possibly can does absolutely exist within me, but there are some milestones I would like to reach and some stones I need to turn before I can take those steps to do so.
That's awesome, man. I look forward to see where you're going to take it, and I really hope that here in the future there'll be some opportunities for us to be able to help spread that word too. I this last year, it was funny you mentioned the Special Forces Foundation. I did the Disney half marathon supporting them and
Awesome.
donated some money and had our logo on the back of the shirts and ran with Tabitha Farmer, whose husband John Farmer was in fifth group
Hmm.
and was part of a an organization with a good buddy of mine, John Turnbull, who we did a recording with both of them actually. And in Syria, 2019, they were hit by an IED blast, and John Turnbull, a guy who I went through the course with, was one of the only survivors. And Tabitha's husband passed away, so it was incredible to see what the Special Forces Foundation was doing, and I was so honored to be able to run the half marathon with Tabitha, her oldest son, um, and hear him talk about his dad and just continue to give back in any way I could. So I commend you for that, man, because there's so much work out there that everybody can do.
There is, man, and the Special Forces Foundation, they're an awesome group of guys. Dean Goebel, the director, is just he's such a good dude. I've had some of my cadre that are on the board now, for prior courses, and they're just such a good and wholesome organization. And I love that they have a funny slant to them as well, as opposed to just being charitable. But your words honor me, so I thank you for saying that. But I figure this is a way to give back and show people that whatever you achieve is not just about you, and that you have to pay it forward in some way. Because if you do it alone, you do it in a vacuum, do it lone wolf style, it's essentially meaningless. I mean, you have to share the wealth in some way.
100%. I'd like to ask you now, man, if there's anything you could tell somebody who's living your story, or if you reached out to them and then they're listening to this, what was some advice that you would give to them?
It's the corniest, most cliche advice ever. It's the same thing I got told. Just do not quit. I said it minutes ago, but just do not desist. Knock on that freaking door, bust it down, breach it, whatever you got to do. Keep knocking at the door until they slam it in your face and bolt it and weld it shut. And if that door doesn't work, then knock on another door. That no matter what you're chasing, it's not the only cool thing in life. And that if you come up short, no matter what you're doing, there's always a place for you somewhere. And there's always something you can succeed in and have fulfillment and happiness in. And that it's, not everything is all, you shouldn't base your entire self worth on the singularity of achieving one thing. That there's a lot cooler things out there, like having a family, being a good husband, being a good father, a good brother, a good wife, anything that it's not just about achievement, it's about the people that you're with.
That's a perfect way to close this out. Well, Lee, I just want to say thank you, and I want to tell everybody here that hey, when you get a chance, go check out 18 Good Guy on Instagram. Send him a message if you have any thoughts. Share the things that he's putting out if you think it's helpful, because you sharing on your platform is going to be able to get out and get it to somebody who possibly might need it. So, hey, Lee, thanks again, and I look forward to things that we're going to be able to do here in the future.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to it as well.
All right, man. Talk to you later.